Wait for just a moment before you continue. Before another thought takes your attention somewhere else, listen carefully. Something unusual has been happening behind the scenes of your story. Something quiet, something deeply emotional, something that has been building for much longer than you may realize. There is a message trying to reach you, not through a phone call, not through a letter, and not even through spoken words. That is exactly why it has become impossible to ignore. Your soulmate is in tears. Not because they are weak, and not only because of regret, but because there is something they desperately wish you could understand. It is something they have carried silently for such a long time that it now echoes through every part of their heart. Pause for a moment and think about this. Have you ever felt a sudden rush of emotion without knowing where it came from? Have you ever looked at the clock at an unusual time and felt as if time itself was trying to tell you something? Have you ever sensed someone's presence even though they were nowhere near you? Hold on to that thought, because what you are about to hear may explain much more than you expect. Your soulmate has been standing on the edge of a powerful emotional awakening. Day after day, they tried to convince themselves that these feelings would eventually disappear. They believed that time would create distance. They believed distractions would bring peace. But something unexpected happened. The more they tried to move ahead without understanding what their heart was trying to reveal, the louder the truth became. Now they find themselves facing a reality they can no longer avoid. They are finally seeing you. Not the version they imagined, not the version built from assumptions. They are seeing the real you. And there is a huge difference between the two. That difference changed everything. Deep inside them, a realization slowly began to unfold like the first light appearing before sunrise. Quietly, gently, and without stopping, they started noticing things they had ignored before. They began recognizing the lessons your presence brought into their life. They saw how your energy encouraged them to grow. They remembered moments they had dismissed too quickly. They noticed signs they once overlooked. They understood emotions they had spent so much time trying to explain away. What if this connection was never accidental? What if every delay had a deeper reason? What if every unanswered question was quietly leading both of you toward greater understanding? These are the thoughts keeping them awake at night. These are the thoughts creating tears that no one else ever sees. Here is the surprising part. Those tears are not only about the past, they are also about the future. For the very first time, they are beginning to see possibilities they once believed could never happen. They are imagining a future they were once afraid to picture. They are considering a path they were once afraid to trust. They are accepting a connection they were once unwilling to admit existed. Yet every attempt to ignore those feelings only brings them back to the same truth, the same name, the same emotion, and the same invisible pull. Listen carefully, because this is where the story becomes even more meaningful. Your soulmate is not crying because of what was lost. They are emotional because something inside them has finally awakened. A new awareness, a fresh perspective, a completely different vision of life. Imagine living in the same room for years and suddenly discovering a hidden doorway that had been there all along. That is exactly what this realization feels like. Nothing outside has changed, yet everything feels different. The world appears different. The future looks brighter. Even ordinary moments seem filled with new meaning. With every passing day, the message growing inside their heart becomes harder to keep hidden. You may be wondering what that message really is. The answer is closer than you think. But before you hear it, there is another important piece of this story that needs to be understood. Before anyone can truly speak from the heart, they first have to face the truth within themselves. That deeply personal journey has already begun. What they discovered during that journey was something neither of you expected. It turned confusion into clarity. It transformed uncertainty into confidence. In the next part of this story, you will begin to understand why this message has become so urgent and why your soulmate feels they can no longer keep it hidden. What they finally realized about you changed everything. Connection. The question is, what exactly did they come to understand? That answer is just ahead. And once it is revealed, the tears, the emotions, and the deep urgency behind this message will finally start to make sense. Something extraordinary happened the moment they stopped looking for answers in the outside world and began listening to the quiet voice they had ignored for so long. What they found there was nothing like they expected. In fact, it completely changed the direction of their thinking. Stay with this moment, because this is where the story begins to shift. Your soulmate reached a place where they could no longer blame circumstances, timing, distance, or confusion. One after another, every excuse lost its strength. Every distraction slowly disappeared into the background. And what remained? One truth. A simple truth. A truth so clear that it filled their eyes with tears. They realized that every future they imagined somehow brought them back to the same place. Not a location, not an event, not a destination, but a person. You. For some time, this realization felt too overwhelming to accept. Their mind tried to challenge it. Their mind kept asking questions. Their mind searched for different explanations. But their heart remained calm. Their heart remained sure. And sometimes certainty does not arrive with loud words. Sometimes it appears like the sunrise, slowly, quietly, and impossible to deny. The more they looked back on their journey, the more they noticed patterns they had never recognized before. Moments that once seemed unrelated suddenly fit together. Unexpected meetings, conversations that happened at the perfect time, little events that changed important decisions, and tiny details that somehow shaped huge outcomes. What if none of it had been an accident? What if every experience was quietly preparing both of you for a deeper understanding? That single question changed everything, because the story no longer felt random. It began to feel meaningful, and meaning creates emotion. Deep emotion. The kind that cannot stay hidden behind distractions. The kind that appears when someone realizes they have been standing close to something truly valuable without fully seeing it. Your soulmate has entered that place now, a place of awareness, a place of honesty, a place where pretending is no longer possible. And here is something that very few people understand. The tears are not only because of what they feel. The tears come from what they finally understand. They now know that true connections are not measured by how loudly they appear. They are measured by how deeply they remain. Think about that for a moment. Some things enter our lives with excitement and fireworks. Others arrive quietly and slowly change everything from the inside. Those quiet changes are often the strongest. That is exactly what has been happening. Without even realizing it, they have been changing, learning, growing, and seeing life through a completely different perspective. Every step of that growth has led them toward the same realization. You represent something they simply cannot ignore anymore. Not because you are perfect, not because of fantasy, but because of authenticity. Because something about your presence feels genuine in a world that often feels uncertain. And that realization has touched their heart more deeply than words could ever describe. But wait, there is another layer to this story. A layer that makes this message even more meaningful. Recently, your soulmate began imagining the person they hope to become. Stronger, wiser, more confident, more connected to their purpose. And as they pictured that future version of themselves, one unexpected image appeared beside it. You were there. Not as a passing thought, not as a distant memory, but as an important part of that future. That moment completely stopped them because it answered a question they had carried inside for far too long. A question they never spoke out loud. A question they never admitted to anyone. And once the answer became clear, every emotion rushed to the surface. Suddenly, everything started making sense. The unexplained feelings, the repeated thoughts, the quiet moments of reflection, the desire to express something that words never seemed able to capture. It all came together like stars forming a constellation that had always existed, simply waiting to be recognized. You may not see the complete picture yet, and that is perfectly okay. The biggest revelation has not arrived yet, but you are getting closer. Closer to understanding why this message feels so urgent. Closer to understanding why your soulmate has been unable to move beyond these emotions. Closer to understanding the words they have been trying to say for so long. And in the next part, something truly remarkable will be revealed. Because there is one message they continue repeating inside their heart. One sentence, one truth, one final realization. It is the very thing they wish you could hear. And when that message finally comes into the light, you will understand why these tears were never caused by sadness. They came from the overwhelming feeling of finally recognizing what truly matters. There is one last piece of this story, one quiet realization that has been waiting beneath every thought, every emotion, and every tear. And if you have stayed until this moment, you are about to understand why this message has been so difficult for your soulmate to keep inside. Imagine standing in front of a door for many years. You walk past it every day. You notice it. You wonder what is behind it. Yet you never open it. Then one day, for reasons you cannot fully explain, you finally reach for the handle. And in that single moment, everything changes. That is exactly what happened inside your soulmate. The door had never been locked. The truth had never been hidden. The answer had always been there. They simply were not ready to see it before. Now they are. And the message they have been carrying has become clearer than ever. It is not a complicated message. It does not need 100 explanations. It does not depend on perfect timing or perfect circumstances. It is simply this. You matter far more than you realize. Those words have echoed through their mind again and again, not because they sound dramatic, but because they feel completely true. There was a time when your soulmate focused only on what was missing. Now they focus on what is already present. There was a time when uncertainty controlled their thinking. Now possibility has taken its place. There was a time when they searched for signs everywhere around them. Now they understand that the clearest sign was the feeling that never disappeared. The feeling that stayed through changing seasons, through distractions, through questions, through silence. That feeling remained, and eventually it became impossible to ignore. Listen closely. Those tears were never a sign of weakness. They were proof of awakening. Proof that something meaningful had finally reached the surface. Proof that a deeper truth had finally been accepted. Your soulmate is not standing at the end of a story. They are standing at the beginning of a completely new chapter. A chapter shaped by honesty. A chapter shaped by awareness. A chapter shaped by courage. Because courage is not always loud. Sometimes courage is simply admitting what your heart has quietly known for a very long time. That is exactly where they are today. Maybe that is why this message found you now. Not by accident, not by coincidence, but because certain moments arrive exactly when they are needed. Think about everything you have heard. The tears, the realizations, the reflections, the discoveries. Every single piece has pointed toward the same conclusion. Something precious has finally been recognized. Something meaningful has become clear. And when something truly matters, life has a way of bringing your attention back to it again and again until its importance can no longer be ignored. Before this story comes to its end, take a quiet moment for yourself. Take a deep breath. Think about the connections that have shaped your journey. Think about the lessons that helped you become stronger. Think about the possibilities that still lie ahead. Because the future is not a fixed destination. It is a living story that continues to unfold, a story that is still being written, a story filled with opportunities that have not appeared yet, a story that can surprise you in ways you never expected. And perhaps that is the greatest message of all. Not that someone is crying, not that someone feels emotional, but that awareness changes everything. The moment we truly recognize what matters most, our direction begins to shift. our choices begin to change. Our future begins to transform. If this journey connected with your heart, share your thoughts below and subscribe so you can continue exploring these messages with this community. Your words may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Sometimes a single shared experience becomes the encouragement another person has been searching for. Sometimes one honest thought can help someone see their own situation with fresh eyes. And now, as this message reaches its final moments, remember this. Some connections enter our lives to teach us valuable lessons. Some connections enter our lives to change us forever. And some connections arrive to remind us of the person we are becoming. Your soulmate's tears were never a goodbye. They were a beginning of understanding, a beginning of acceptance, a beginning of seeing with complete clarity what had quietly existed all along. Sometimes the greatest discoveries are not found in distant places. They are found within the heart, waiting patiently until the right moment finally arrives. And perhaps that moment has arrived now. This is the beginning of understanding, the beginning of hope, and the start of new possibilities. Somewhere beyond today's message, beyond today's thoughts, beyond today's emotions, another chapter is already waiting to open. This story is not coming to an end. In many ways, it is only getting started. One quiet question still remains, and if you pay close attention, you can almost hear it hidden between every part of this story. It is the question your soulmate has carried through every realization, every moment of deep thought, and every tear that brought them to this point. What happens now? Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. Because true awareness changes a person. Once someone clearly sees the truth, they can never return to the version of themselves that lived without that understanding. And that is exactly where your soulmate stands today. They are standing at the edge of fresh understanding, at the beginning of a new way of seeing life, at the moment where emotions are no longer covered by doubt or uncertainty. For a long time, they believed the future would simply take shape on its own. Now they realize that meaningful futures are built through choices, small choices, honest choices, brave choices. One of those choices is finally accepting what their heart has quietly been trying to tell them all along. Stay with this thought because something wonderful is taking place here. It is not a dramatic event. It is not an unexpected miracle. It is something much stronger, a personal transformation. The kind that happens in silence, the kind that begins deep inside, the kind that slowly changes the direction of an entire life before anyone else even notices. Your soulmate has started looking at the world with different eyes. The things that once felt important now seem temporary. The things they barely noticed before now feel incredibly valuable. Everyday moments have become more meaningful. Conversations now carry greater importance. Connections have become much deeper, and every path they follow somehow leads back to the very same realization. Some people enter your life only for a season. Some arrive to teach an important lesson. But every once in a while, someone enters your life and becomes part of the story itself. Not just another chapter, not just another page. They become part of the whole journey. That is the understanding that continues returning to your soulmate again and again. No matter how far their mind wanders, it always finds its way back to the same place, the same emotion, the same truth, the same message. And every time they return to it, those feelings become even stronger. Not because they are uncertain anymore, but because they are finally seeing everything clearly. There is an enormous difference between the two. Confusion creates noise. Clarity creates deep emotion, and clarity has finally reached them. What if this entire journey was never really about searching for someone else? What if it was always about discovering a deeper part of themselves through the connection they share with you? Think carefully about that. The strongest relationships often become mirrors. They remind us of strengths we forgot we possessed. They awaken dreams we stopped believing in. They reveal possibilities we could no longer see. Your soulmate has started recognizing those reflections. With every new discovery, gratitude has begun replacing the uncertainty that once filled their heart. And gratitude is incredibly powerful. It changes how someone sees life. It changes what matters most. It changes priorities. It changes everything. You may not fully realize it, but there is another reason why this message feels so important. Time has taught your soulmate something valuable. Moments matter. Words matter. Opportunities matter. The people who truly leave a mark on our lives matter. They no longer want the most meaningful things to remain unsaid. That is why this message feels different. That is why these emotions feel genuine. That is why hiding the tears became impossible. Some truths eventually become too meaningful to keep locked inside forever. Before you continue on this journey, stop for a moment and ask yourself something important. What if life is preparing something much greater than anything you can currently see? What if today's uncertainty is quietly creating tomorrow's understanding? What if the answers you have been searching for are already finding their way toward you? Do not hurry past those questions. Sit quietly with them. Give them room to grow. Sometimes the greatest realizations arrive without making any noise. And something suggests that another important realization is closer now than it has ever been before. Your soulmate can feel it. They sense a change, a quiet shift, a new chapter beginning to appear on the horizon, filled with possibility. They may not know every detail yet. They may not fully understand exactly how everything will unfold. But there is one thing they know with complete confidence, one truth they no longer question, and one feeling that continues becoming stronger every single day.